16 and Away from Home by Arleta Richardson. Chapter 6. Thomas Gives a Party.
October 25th, 1889.
Letty is having the Ladies' Aid meeting on Saturday, and SJ and I volunteered to serve the tea for her. Next Friday is Halloween, and Thomas announced a class party at his house. Russ has already asked me to go with him. SJ, of course, will be with Thomas. Letty surveyed the table critically.
I guess it looks all right, she decided. Now, be sure you ask each lady what she wants in her tea and hand around the sandwiches and cakes when their plates are empty. I am certainly glad to have you girls here today. I'll enjoy the meeting much more not worrying about serving.
We're glad to do it,
Sarah Jane assured her.
You don't need to worry about a thing.
The ladies arrived and we put their wraps in the spare room. When they had all gathered in the parlor and begun their sewing, we sat down in the dining room to wait until Letty called us.
Just listen to all that chatter,
I said.
Visiting with other ladies must be more fun than the sewing.
Over the hum of voices, we heard Mrs. Owens, Clarice's mother. I always hate it when Halloween comes around, she said. This year is worse than ever. The mischief is starting a whole week early.
Have you had a problem at your house, Gertrude?
Someone asked. I should guess so. A group of boys came around last night after dark and rolled the chicken barrel down the hill into the chicken coop. Then they took the 2 big pumpkins out of the field. If Calvin hadn't gone out, there's no telling what else they might have done. Mrs. Owens was indignant. I can't think what parents are doing while their children are out disturbing the countryside. I'm not the sort to make trouble with my neighbors. I'd sooner suffer in silence. But it would be only right if someone informed some people of what their boys were doing. At this she must have looked directly at Thomas's mother because we heard Mrs. Charles's answer. Why, Gertrude, you can't mean you think Thomas was one of them. No, I didn't call any names, Mrs. Owens replied. But everyone knows ministers' sons are apt to be the ringleaders when anything like that goes on. And I do know whom I saw. I can't believe that Thomas was involved, Mrs. Charles said, but I'll surely speak to him when I get home. Sarah Jane pulled me into the kitchen.
Thomas was certainly not at the Owens' place last night, she declared. That's a horrid thing for that woman to say. It doesn't seem like something Thomas would do, I agreed. But we couldn't know for sure if we didn't see him someplace else. I was here and you were at the school library studying.
Sarah Jane blushed.
Uh-oh, I said. You weren't at the school library studying?
Yes, I was,
she said. And so was Thomas. But we finished early and we sort of went for a walk. We saw some fellows running across the Owens' field, but I don't know who they were.
You'll have to tell Mrs. Charles, Sarah Jane. It wouldn't be fair if Thomas got into trouble for something he didn't do. It was Sarah Jane's turn to look distressed.
I can't, Mabel. Thomas didn't have permission to be out. He was confined to his room every evening this week for getting a low grade on a math test. He said by last night he couldn't stand it any longer, so he went out his window and met me at the library. If I told Mrs. Charles that, he'd be in trouble with his father.
Letty called us, and we had no time to discuss it again until after the ladies had gone.
If Mrs. Charles asked Thomas if he was at the Owens' place last night, he can truthfully say no, Sarah Jane said. But if she asks if he was out, he'll have to tell her.
It looks to me like you'll both be in trouble. You didn't have permission to be anywhere but the library either.
I would have let Letty know if I had known that Thomas was going to meet me, Sarah Jane protested. I didn't just sneak out. But I can't tell her now, or I'd have to tell on him too.
You have a problem,
I said.
Now it's my turn to feel a little glad I'm not involved in it. That hasn't happened often in our lifetime.
On Monday, Thomas confided to all of us that Mrs. Owens had come to talk to his father.
What happened?
Sarah Jane wanted to know.
Did your father ask you about it? Worse. He told Mrs. Owens I couldn't have been there because he knew I'd been in my room all evening. Now I feel guilty about making him say something that wasn't true."
"Why don't you just tell him what you did?" I asked.
"That would mean trouble for Sarah Jane," Thomas said. "Besides another week of evenings in my room."
"Including Friday night?"
Sarah Jane asked. Thomas nodded. "I'm sure of it."
"Would you have to cancel the party?"
"No, I don't think he'd punish the whole class. He'd probably say that Warren could take charge of the party." Sarah Jane sighed. "Maybe we could wait until next Saturday to tell them. That would take care of your conscience, but not make you miss the party."
"If you do that, you might as well end up spending the rest of your life in your room," Molly said. "Parents have a way of being sticky about things like that."
"Not to mention deceit not being high on the list of Christian virtues," Thomas said glumly. "I know I have to tell Father. I just hate to think of doing it." "He didn't think about it very long," Warren told us the next morning. "He told his father last night. I don't know what all was said, but I know Reverend Charles believes that Thomas wasn't at the Owenses Friday night. Thomas said his father would have to tell Mrs. Owens that he was mistaken about Thomas being in his room, though."
That means she'll never believe that Thomas didn't roll her rain barrel into the chicken coop, Molly replied. She believes what she wants to, even if the preacher tells her differently.
"I suppose there'll be no party for Thomas?" Sarah Jane asked. Warren nodded. "Just as he expected. I guess that's the only fair punishment, but the party won't be much fun without him."
It doesn't seem right to have a party in his barn and not have him there, Molly agreed. But I'm sure we'll have fun. We always do.
"Is there any chance that your father will relent at the last minute?"
we asked Thomas later.
"I doubt it," he replied. "If it were just between the two of us, maybe, but not with Mrs. Owens hovering in the background. She's never had much tolerance for preachers' kids, and she's finally got one where she wants him."
Halloween evening was a perfect night for a party. The harvest moon was huge, and the breeze was cool. As we got ready to leave, Letty reminded us about sweaters. "It will be warm in the barn, but you'll get cool walking home. It was nice of Russ to offer to escort both of you."
"I feel like a tag-along," Sarah Jane grumbled. "But it was nice of him. It's better than being walked over and back by Jacob."
The big barn behind the parsonage was alive with activity when we arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters. Pumpkin faces were lighted with candles. Corn shocks stood in the corners and bales of hay were placed conveniently for some of the older people who had come to watch the fun. Reverend Charles was lining everyone up for a relay race.
"Put the apple on your head and run as quickly as you can across the barn and back to your row. If the apple falls, you'll have to chase it and put it back. Otherwise, you can't touch it. Ready? Go."
"Oh my!" Molly gasped as she ran back to the line. "I chased that apple all the way over and back. It didn't stay on my head for more than 3 steps. We bobbed for apples, played Skip to My Lou, and had just finished a tug-of-war when I looked toward the door and saw Mrs. Owens sailing into the barn. Warren saw her at the same time.
"Uh-oh," he said. "She doesn't look like someone who's come to enjoy the party."
She glared around the barn at the young people who were drifting toward the big table that was loaded with food. Reverend Charles walked over to where she was.
"Good evening, Mrs. Owens. Will you join us for the refreshments?"
"That's not what I came for," Mrs. Owens snapped. "Suppose you tell me where your son Thomas is now, Reverend Charles."
"He wasn't allowed to attend the party," the minister replied. "He's in his room."
"Ha!" Mrs. Owens sniffed. "That's what you said last week. I've come to inform you that I saw him in my field again. You would do well to keep a closer watch on that boy, Reverend. Now, what do you intend to do about him?"
"Mrs. Owens, I assure you that Thomas has not left his room. He is being punished for going out without permission. He would not do the same thing again. Would you care to come to the house to see for yourself?"
"I certainly would,"
Mrs. Owens declared.
She marched ahead of Reverend Charles, and Warren trailed along behind. He told us later what happened.
"Thomas," his father called. "Will you come out, please?"
There was no answer, so Reverend Charles knocked on the door and then opened it. The room was empty. "Well," Mrs. Owens said triumphantly. Reverend Charles looked perplexed.
"Warren, do you know where Thomas is?" "No, sir," Warren answered. "He was here when I left, and I know he intended to stay here. He told me to come and tell him all about the party as soon as it was over."
Just then the back door opened, and Thomas came up the stairs. His face and hands were black with soot.
"Thomas, what happened? Where have you been?"
"I'm sorry I left, Father," Thomas replied. "But I had to. I was looking out the window when I saw the haystack in the Owens' field catch fire. I didn't have time to come and get you. I ran over and helped Mr. Owens put it out before it spread to his barn." Reverend Charles put his arms around Thomas and hugged him. Mrs. Owens muttered something about needing to get home and hurried out the door.
"Come on, boys," the minister said. "There's a lot of food out there, and we'd better hurry if we're going to get our share."
I hope that woman tells you she's sorry for accusing you,
Sarah Jane said to Thomas on the way home.
"It's all right if she doesn't," Thomas replied. "At least Mr. Owens caught the boys responsible. I'm just glad to have my name cleared. Not to mention the fact that you got in on the good food," Russ added. "It was a great party, Thomas, but the next time you give one, try to attend the whole thing."
End of chapter 6.